excited that you agreed to meet with us. You have been an inspiration. You're somebody that we've been listening to, and you kind of helped us get into this mode of taking kind of action in our own personal life. Um, and honestly, like just looking at the brand that you have built over what seems like a really strong couple of years where you just like started from I assume that you jumped into Modern Mom Problems right after Nickelodeon, correct?
Man, first of all, I just want to give you the biggest hug ever because you're gonna make me cry with such wonderful things that you're saying. Like, stop. I'm gonna like jump through the computer and hug you. You have
I mean,
no
we
idea
Virtual
how
uploading.
you yeah, uploading virtual hugs. Boop, boop, boop. You have no idea what that means to me because sometimes when we're working at home doing this, like I feel like it's in a vacuum sometimes. And so unless I hear feedback like that, I'm like, oh my God, someone cares. So thank you.
absolutely. I mean, we are like can only hope to have half as much success as you know, because
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So to answer your question officially, I started Modern Mom Probs in early 2016 and my son was 3 at the time. I left Nickelodeon, which I loved working at. It was like the best job with most creative people. It was a great job. I was there for 5 years and I left there when Jack was born to stay home with him full time. And
Wow.
then when he was 3, I was looking for a creative outlet and looking for a way to connect with people. And at that time, there was a shiny new website called Canva that had just come out, which I know sounds crazy to think that, but Canva had like just come out and like it was still in the fairly early days of Instagram. And then so I started making mom jokes and then it kind of just went from there.
Took off. I love that.
that is incredible.
Yeah, which again is just an inspiration because you talked about how you kind of left when your child was 3 to kind of be home with it. And I feel like that's kind of the point in life that we're at right now, where our
Mhm.
children are just young enough and we're really wanting to be present
Mhm.
in their life. And we also still want a creative outlet. And that's
Absolutely.
kind of
Yep.
working together. That's kind of how we got to the art of hobbiness. So very relatable. Again, like what we were saying, you were kind of like that pioneer that created that like platform that we could build that off of. So again, like we're so thankful that you're willing to be on our show because that's such a huge momentous thing for us to have you on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
guys, I'm really like you're making me I'm literally gonna cry. I'm gonna hang up this phone and just cry and be like, thank you.
I mean, we
No,
were really, truly like felt so grateful that you replied to us. We didn't know if,
course.
we're
I
so
reply
happy.
to
Yeah. Oh,
everybody.
it's
I
wonderful.
do.
Yeah.
People always think that they're like, "Oh, you must not like get back to people." I'm like, "Of course I get back to
Yeah.
people." I mean, people that are not like lunatics or something
Sure.
like that. Maybe
Absolutely.
that's a different story.
Yeah.
I love it. Trial. Okay, well, so like tell us about, the whole point of our podcast is finding a hobby, right? It's which is
Yes.
a basically underlying tone of finding self-care, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I stumbled upon an old Instagram post that you made like a year ago, and it lists like your favorite hobbies. Did I send that to you?
Yeah. So I think it was something along the lines of switching between apps
For 3 hours.
for 3 hours, not speaking to anyone like for days, listening to the same songs you've been listening to the last 15 years, and imagine yourself in situations that won't actually happen. So I think we can
Check,
relate to all
check,
of those.
check,
Yeah.
check,
Yes,
check.
yes, yes.
Relatable.
You are absolutely right. That is 1,000% true. But it's funny because I've always had a very interesting relationship with hobbies. And
Mhm.
and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So when I was a kid, I was raised by a single mom who worked 120 hours a week every week for like 20 years. And when you have hobbies or when people have hobbies, it requires two things. It requires time and money, right? And my mom, because she was working so much, didn't have time to bring me and pick me up from any extracurriculars. And also, we didn't have that much money to spend on extracurriculars. So nowadays, you see so many kids signed up for dance and cheerleading and all those things and gymnastics. And like, I would have loved to have done any of those things. And I didn't get the opportunity to do any of those things.
Mhm.
What did I do with my childhood? I played with my friends a lot and I watched a lot of TV. A ton of TV.
Yeah.
So much TV that I knew someday that I would grow up and work in media. And I
Wow.
majored in communications and business at Villanova University. So like I knew that I was always meant to work in television because at that time, like internet wasn't really a thing. So I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't like people weren't
Right.
making money like as personal brands. Um So I knew that I always wanted to work in media. There was like no doubt in my mind about that, mainly because I watched so much television. But but as a kid, I always remember thinking, man, I don't have any hobbies. Like, of course, I played with like my Barbies
Sure.
and I played with my friends and, like went bike riding, which I ended up really like bike riding anyway, but I did it. And, and like, I never played any sports. I didn't have any extracurriculars growing up. And also, at that time, children were not nearly as busy as they are nowadays, right? Like some kids like may have played like baseball or softball and stuff, but it wasn't like the packed schedules that we see today. So I like to say, like, I turned out just fine, like not having extracurriculars because, like I said, we didn't have time or money. I did do dance when I was 4 years old for a really short period of time because I didn't have anyone to pick me up and bring me to dance class.
Yep.
So I think maybe like my dad dropped me off once, maybe like my mom picked me up another time, and then that was it. And I have the photos for that to prove the fact that like I did actually do dance because I had like a little bumblebee costume or something like that. But yeah, as far as like hobbies as a child, I didn't. And like I said, that was sort of like a weird source of like shame for me is that like I didn't have a hobby. So even up until my teens and 20s, I always was a person that was like, oh, I don't really have any hobbies. Like I work or I babysit, but like that's for money, right? So then inherently that's not a hobby. So then once I became like a full functioning adult, right? Like I'm like married with as a mom and stuff like that as I am now. Then going back to that time and money thing, then I was able to have hobbies. And so when I think like, okay, well, what do I like to do for myself? I love Pilates. I actually just got back from Pilates this morning, which is why my hair is wet because I just took a shower. So even before I was doing Pilates, I was doing something called the bar method, which is like bar exercise, but I stopped doing bar to go into Pilates, which they're both like more or less the same thing if you're familiar with it. And what else do I do? Oh, I got into Legos, and I'll tell you how I got into Legos. So I have an 11-year-old son who he struggles with like dexterity issues a little bit. So he used to have a hard time with Legos. And so he was like, Mommy, can you like build these for me? And so I always said yes. Like I loved it. I didn't mind. So I would build them for him and then he would play with them in an imaginative way, right? He'd get the minifigures and like have these like big, elaborate, super creative like worlds within these Lego sets. So I started like building his Legos. And then at first my husband's like, why are you doing his Legos for him? Like, let him do it himself. And I was like, no, he's asking me to. He wants me to. And my husband's like, all right, fine. And so, I started building all of my son's Legos, like all of them, like not, like every birthday, every Christmas, everyone always gives him like, Lego sets. And so I'm the one Christmas morning sitting on the floor, crisscross applesauce, building all the Legos.
Well, now the thing is to have the kits, right? Like different like kits for Legos versus just building freehand. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I'm not building freehand. I'm building like people are buying him sets and kits, and I'm building him the kits. He's not building. He's just playing imaginatively with them once I'm finished building them. So then I realized I was like, dude, this is something I really enjoy. Like I really like building Legos. So this past Christmas, I'll never forget it. We were at my mother-in-law's house and my son received a Lego set for Christmas, as he does like every Christmas. And I was sitting there building it like on the floor, as I often do. And my mom, who was also there, was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm building Jack's Lego set. And I was like, I love building Legos. And I said, I love building Legos because when I was a child, Legos were not made for girls. They were like only for boys, and it was like maybe a rocket ship, and like there was nowhere near the amount of selection that we have today for Legos, right? So I don't think I ever played Legos until I was like 30 something years old.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And yeah, like literally never played like never touched a Lego until I was like in my 30s. And it's something that we take for granted now, but if you would have seen in the early 80s or like the like early 90s, like there were not Lego sets for girls.
Right.
So I was building a Lego set and I was like, yeah, well, it's because like I didn't have them when I was a kid. And to which my mom replied, oh, you poor deprived little thing. You never had any toys. And like I had tons of toys. You know how I said like my mom worked a lot and like I didn't have like money for extracurriculars. What she didn't spend in extracurriculars, she spent on toys for me. I mean, I was swimming in toys in my house. So we have an apartment. In my apartment, we were swimming in toys. Like I had like every Barbie doll, every whatever.
Yes.
So that's why she was like, "Oh, you poor thing. You didn't have Legos when you were a kid, but you had every other toy." I'm like, "Yeah, mom, no, I understand. I wasn't saying it to be like a brat. I was just saying
Right.
like because like Legos weren't necessarily available to girls as when I was a child. I didn't play them, and now I have the opportunity to play them,
Right.
and they're awesome." And so to bring this full circle back to a hobby thing, this past Valentine's Day, my husband bought me this beautiful Lego set. It's an orchid, and it's actually like specifically for adults because like now adults are starting to get into Legos.
Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
really was like 18 plus. It's like the Lego botanical collection.
Oh,
And they have
wow.
like
That.
yeah, they have gorgeous. They have like succulents and orchids and like all different flowers. They had a bonsai tree was a different set.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
all different
nice.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it was very cool. So I thought it was super sweet. So my husband, in addition to buying me real flowers, he bought me Lego flowers so that I
That's
could
so
sit and build by
thoughtful.
myself. I
Oh,
thought that was really sweet.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
and I
sweet.
like the fact that like your family is even recognizing like this hobby that you've just kind of taken on and are trying to support it in a way that's
That's
like even
awesome.
getting you like kids. Like
Yeah.
that really is what kind of fosters a hobby is getting like that natural support around you. So that's
Yeah.
amazing to hear that you're getting that as an adult.
I thought it was just funny that my mom and then my husband and I were like laughing so hard because we were like, of course my mom was like, "Oh, you poor
You couldn't
thing, you
do
didn't
it
have
right. Right.
anything."
Yeah.
Like, mom, that wasn't the point. For it was more of a point of like girls didn't play with Legos in the
But
80s. That's all I
Totally.
was saying.
Yeah, totally. We talked a lot about that, how there's just like that gender hobby gap of like certain hobbies are defined for a woman versus a man. And
Mhm.
hopefully that's changing. I mean, it is changing, but
Sure.
definitely when we were growing up, it was like that. So
Which I love the
yeah.
fact that
Yep.
Lego is like one of yours because I,
Mhm.
like you said, like it was originally kind of like a gender oriented
Yep.
toy. And to hear that like in your adulthood, you're inspired, re-inspired by a very child toy
Definitely.
to be a hobby.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, it's tons of fun. I really enjoy it. And like I think it's good for my hands, it's good for my like spatial relationship. Like there's a lot that goes
Probably
into
really
it.
kind of get
And
into it and focus and not think about other things
mhm,
and just yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
So here's a question I
Yeah.
have, so, and it's something that we kind of talk about often is how do you like define a time for you to sit down and actually play
Mhm.
with the Legos? Like how do you, because I mean, obviously you're running Modern Mom Probs, you've got your mother, you've got a lot going on in your personal life.
Yeah.
How do you like slim it down to
Mhm.
finding that time
Mhm.
for yourself to play with your Legos?
Well, it's funny. So usually with the Legos, it's anytime Jack receives a set for Christmas, birthday, whatever, or just a random just because present.
Mhm.
So I'm usually, like I said, crisscross applesauce on the floor building the Lego set with him. So that's sort of catch as catch can, but also that's doing something with him. You know, so
Mhm.
like we're doing something
Yeah.
together. He
Mhm.
usually sits and like waits patiently while I'm building it, or
Oh.
now that he's older, he will help me and I'll say,
Mhm.
"Here, like you do this part, I'll do this part, we'll divide and conquer." So
Sure.
it's something that we're able to do together, which I love.
That's
Yes.
But
awesome. And you're kind of setting an
when
example for him too. Yeah. Mhm.
exactly. And so then when I received the orchid set from my husband, when did I do that? I think that, you know what? That was again in the evening. My son was sitting playing on the floor with other Legos, and then I was building that set. So we do a lot of parallel play in my house. Like, even
Oh,
if my son is on his like video games and he's playing like Roblox or something like that, like I'll sit next to him and maybe be on my laptop for work. So,
Mhm.
like, that we're like together, but
mhm.
separate, if that makes sense. So we do a lot of parallel play in my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
So I know
But to answer your question, I totally did not answer your question, but I'll answer it now. Is
That's awesome.
um I often my son, you know, he's 11 now, so he goes to school during the day and although I do work from home, I try if I can to carve out time while he's at school.
do you put it in your schedule or is it just very like natural, like you're in your work mode and then you're kind of like, okay, now I need to stop and transition to like a time of just like me and decompression almost?
I am very good about time blocking my calendar. I use like Google Calendar and like my time for the most part is like really accounted for throughout the course of the day.
Okay.
But no, I don't necessarily block off decompression time. I do block off if I'm going to Pilates or if I, you know, want to work out in the morning,
Mhm.
something like that. I'll block off my time, but not necessarily for the other stuff. I probably should.
Yeah, I think that's
You
one
know,
thing we struggle with, and I think a lot of women struggle with is like everything else comes first before your self-care. And how do we switch that? Because that's so important, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. But like I said, I think the parallel play, like if it's appropriate for you and your family, the parallel play is so nice because like while your children are sitting on the floor playing, then you could be doing your own thing at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a
Absolutely.
good tip for sure. So
So I know that you're learning some other hobbies. You had mentioned you're also learning Italian.
yeah, love to hear a little
Sì,
bit about that.
certo, sì. So my son, we through, I guess it was it out school. I guess so. We had started getting him Italian lessons online, virtual Italian lessons, with a tutor who's based in Italy.
Wow.
Okay.
And so he was meeting with her once a week, and he still meets with her once a week. So that's where I'm building with this story. So he was meeting with her once a week, and we were starting to do Duolingo to supplement the stuff that he was learning with her. And Duolingo obviously teaches you other different vocabulary. So we started doing that, and then he kind of stopped doing Duolingo, but then kept going with his tutor. And so then I took over his Duolingo account. And now I'm proud to say that I am 613 days into
Wow.
learning Italian on Duolingo.
Wow, that's a huge
impressive.
commitment. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I do it every day, twice a day, because the way that Duolingo works is like it wants you to like you have to do it in the morning to get like XP at night and to get the XP in the morning. So it's sort of like just keeps you there in this cycle.
Game kind of.
And yeah, it's like very gamified. The whole thing is gamified. And so then just last night, I met with my son's tutor for the first time so that I now can have one-on-one tutoring in addition to him. So like his time with her is separate, and now I'm going to start mine because Duolingo is awesome and all, but it's hard when you don't have anyone to speak with.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so like I said, I'm 600 plus days into it, but I want to like have conversations. And so now I'm meeting with Julia. And so we're doing that probably was like 7:30 on Thursdays going forward. So then that's like after dinner. We always have like that time like after dinner but before bedtime,
Mhm.
which is sort of like a weird time of day in my house. Not weird, it's just it's like yeah, I guess it's weird. It's a little downtime. I don't know.
Yep. It's a little bit of a stretch.
Transitional
Yep,
period, like-
absolutely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
transition period is a good way to describe it. So that's what I'm gonna be doing on
What
Thursday.
inspired you guys to start learning Italian? Was there a reason? Are you working towards anything or just for fun?
Well, for fun, really, like truly as a hobby. There's a couple reasons. One, we are of Italian descent, so there's that feeling of wanting to learn your native language, right? Like, but I mean, my grandparents have been here for over 100 years. So we want to do that because we're of Italian descent. And in our town, we live in a very diverse town, and people speak all kinds of like languages. Like I live in a town that's probably 35% Korean, 30 to 40% Korean. So everyone's like taking their like Korean classes and their Chinese classes and like all different classes. And my son and I were like, well, do you want to do Italian? And he was like, yeah. And so that was sort of what prompted us to do it, is so that we could get in touch like with our roots and
Yeah, that
ancestors.
makes sense.
And so that's how we started doing it. But I am pleased to say that we are going to Italy next summer.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I'm
Looking forward
excited.
to
So
it.
I want to be able to speak better when we go. My husband and I went to Italy the year before my son was born, and we had a great time. And believe it or not, like when you're in another country and you're immersed in it, like you have no choice but to, pick it up. And we did in a very short period of time. But now I'm going to feel so much more confident going next summer.
That's going to be so fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of brings us to the fourth hobby was traveling. You love to travel. Yeah.
Yes. So we love to travel. So this past weekend, my husband and my son and I, we were in the car and we were talking about hobbies. And that's when my son was like, you don't have any hobbies, Mom. And I was like, I do too have hobbies. Like I do Duolingo. I do Pilates. Like I do all this different stuff. And he's like, no, Mom. And so my son does parkour and which is, like American Ninja Warrior.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole like intro in The Office where they're practicing.
Oh, so it's kind of familiar.
Yes, exactly. So my son, he does not do traditional sports. He does this American Ninja Warrior. So every Tuesday we bring him to the gym. It's like this gorgeous specialized gym just for American Ninja Warrior stuff. I say stuff, training. And so that's where we were driving on Tuesday having this conversation. And so I said to my son, okay, well, in addition to Ninja Warrior, like what else are your hobbies, buddy? If you're telling me I don't have hobbies, what are your hobbies? He's like,
Great question.
well, Yeah, he's like, obviously gaming because he loves like, online
Sure.
gaming with
Yeah.
his friends. And then he said, and travel, mom. He's like, I love to travel. And I was
Oh,
like, you're
that's
Oh,
right,
awesome.
buddy. I was like, well, if you love to travel, like, I love to travel because I'm the one booking these trips. So, so
with the leg
clearly,
working.
yeah, exactly. Like clearly I also enjoy traveling. So that's why I put that in there. And so I do believe that learning about the Italian culture, learning the language obviously fits into the travel. But we've been on a real travel kick lately. We went recently, probably in the last 6 months, went up and down the Eastern Seaboard. We went to Boston, Washington D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, like
Oh, wow.
all of the things there. Yeah, learned all about the American Revolution
Wow.
and like Revolutionary War history. And then also we've like recently been to Texas and Arizona. Arizona is like our favorite spot. That's like we love Arizona. So like we've been to Arizona a couple times in the past couple years, and Nevada. Like my son, he's like a great little traveler. And so I'm just like, all right, pack your stuff. Let's go.
Yeah, that's so fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I like to hear that you guys are like talking about
Hmm.
hobbies and like keeping that like a
Hmm.
relevant topic in your life. Because I feel like now for us that
Yeah.
that's a very relevant topic in our relationships with our family. Something I kind of want to go back to is you had once said a statement in an email conversation that we had where you said you didn't initially think that you had hobbies, but now you believe that you do have a lot of hobbies.
Hmm.
What was your mindset when you kind of reflected upon yourself and looked at what hobbies you had and discovered what we actually called hidden hobbies?
Hmm.
Where there are hobbies that we've had all along, we just didn't know it
Or
because
we didn't define them as
we
hobbies.
just
Yeah.
didn't define them as
Hmm.
hobbies. Yeah.
I love that. I love that the hidden hobbies. I going back to what I said earlier in the conversation is that my entire life I thought I didn't have hobbies to the point where I would say that to people. People would be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like what do you like to do, Tara?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know. I don't really have any hobbies." Like some people love to garden or jog or whatever it is, and I always said for years, if you ask me like what do you like to do, I'm like, oh, I don't have any hobbies, I don't really know. But like that's not true.
Right.
Like obviously everyone always enjoys something,
Right.
Something,
Like, why do
right?
we downplay those things? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
shouldn't. I historically always love going shopping,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
We talk
that.
about how we love going to brunch.
Yeah, that counts.
No,
One of my really good friends, she's a content creator. One of my really good friends recently, someone had asked her, I guess it was like her business coach. I think it was her business coach asked her, so like, what are your hobbies? And she's like,
Mhm.
browsing at Home Goods and Marshalls.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
you could say that. That
Right.
100% counts.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think you're right. I think many times people are shy to say things like that. Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
who,
We're gonna be
I,
shamed for it, like you said. Yeah.
yeah, we're shameful around like, oh, I like to browse at Marshalls, or for me, like, oh, I like to go to the mall. I love going to the mall. I love walking around, especially when it's empty. You
Oh,
can just like walk and look at things.
yes.
Love that. So historically, I guess going to the mall was probably always one that I had that was a hidden hobby that I didn't realize I have. Because it's not always about spending money. Sometimes
Right.
it's just like getting
Yeah.
out and walking and just
Enjoying
looking
the
at things.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like a
Absolutely.
production of something.
Hmm.
It's more of just like in the moment of
Hmm.
something that just feels like a decompression or a
Yep.
self-care.
Yes, exactly. Even when going back to when my son goes to Ninja Warrior class, it happens to be, well, one, it's next to a Trader Joe's. So we drop him off, go to Trader Joe's, and then
Motivation is
pick him up.
everything.
It's the best. I mean, talk about like habit stacking. It's like he's doing a thing. I do my grocery shopping for the week, pick him up, and then we go home. It's amazing. But on the times when I'm not grocery shopping, there's also a mall nearby. And so I will drop him off at practice, go to the mall, and then pick him up. And that's wonderful.
I mean, that is your time. That's
That is your
awesome.
time.
Yeah.
You just used a word, habit stacking. I don't know what
Yeah.
habit
I've not
stacking
heard
is.
that
What
phrase
does
either,
that
really.
mean?
Yeah.
You're going to appreciate this one. Okay. Habit stacking is when you are doing multiple positive attributes at the same time. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If I'm doing my Duolingo while I'm on my treadmill.
Gotcha.
So I'm walking on my treadmill, getting
Mhm.
my calories, right? Getting my steps in while simultaneously, learning a new language. Another person, I think this one came from a book called Atomic Habits,
Oh, yeah.
written by James Clear,
Mhm.
where he says, like, do push-ups while you're waiting for the shower water to heat up before you go into the shower.
Optimizing your time. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
my husband like started, so that's what it is. It's optimizing your time, right?
Go
Yeah.
on.
So my husband had like a post-it note in our bathroom for like months. I think it finally like just deteriorated because of like the steam and stuff. But it said do 20 push-ups while the water warms up. And so that's what it is. So you're just like, it's those little things, or, doing squats while you brush your teeth. Like that's a great example too. Just like adding in like little tweaks, little workouts, that kind of stuff. So that's habit stacking. But I always feel good like if I'm walking on my treadmill and doing Duolingo, because I do Duolingo on my iPad. And so I do it on my iPad while I'm walking.
Really? My God, I just learned a new term that I feel like I'm totally
yeah.
right.
You're totally going to use it now.
What can I do while I'm drinking coffee, Tara? Any suggestions?
Other than scrolling social media.
Scroll.
Right.
Oh, dang it. That's what I was going to say. Because that's what I do. I'm like drinking. I was drinking. Actually, funny story. This is totally true. Right before we jumped on, I was having a cup of coffee, eating a bowl of cereal, and scrolling my phone. And then I looked at the clock and I was like, oh no, I forgot to do my Duolingo. So I had to like run and do my Duolingo, squeeze that in before we jumped on the phone. But I did, and that's it.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have one last question for you before we go.
Anything.
Like,
yeah.
You are so like you wear so many hats, and I would love to just if you have any tips on how do you manage it all from like taking care of yourself, your business, you're being a mom, from like keeping from being overwhelmed as a woman.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, it's super important to delegate, to ask for help. And so I know everyone always says that, and it's like harder said than done. But that actually was a process for me, because when my son was younger, I did not ask my husband for as much help at home as I do now. And I think it's also because like now the mental load of motherhood is more of a conversation that people are having online across the board.
Oh yeah.
And so like my husband is very aware of that. So he contributes more now than I think he did several years ago before this conversation came out. So for one, that's super helpful for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, he'll cook dinner sometimes. He cooks dinner fairly often, but he cooks dinner, I'd still do the laundry, but he takes out the garbage, like we each like divide and conquer our different tasks. And that really, really helps. So have that conversation with your partner, if you have a partner, to take some of the load off you, because like you can't do everything by yourself.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
And then from like a professional standpoint, I have an assistant. She helps me with some administrative things. Like it's the stuff that I don't want to do, not in a negative way. It's just like, I'll give you an example. Like I sometimes hate down to sit and write something. So she'll sit down and help me craft an email or show notes for my podcast, that kind of stuff. So offload the things that, I don't want to say don't serve you, because that's not really the right way to say that, but the things that you don't always love doing, so
sure. Bring you joy. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that makes sense. Or even like, focus on the things that would bring more of like an ROI to your business than the things that are like keeping you down, that are not wasting your time, but that's what's taking up your time instead of going out and doing more profitable things. So that's part of that too, but it's hard. And again, I think sometimes is carving out the time when you can make it. Going back to what I was saying about parallel play with my son, it's like, I like to spend time with him and just like physically just like be with him sometimes, but like he wants to like game with his friends, and I respect that and I understand that, so which is why we'll sit next to each other and kind of hang out.
I like that. Well, I mean, Tara, again, we're so appreciative that you came on the show with us today. Is there anything that you want to promote, perhaps your podcast, while you're here with us?
Yeah, of course. So I have two things that I just wanted to think off the top of my head.
Absolutely.
Have you read the book Unicorn Space, Find Your Unicorn Space by Eve Rodsky?
Write that down.
Highly recommend it.
Okay.
It's a book about Eve came up with the term called unicorn space, and it is a space that is just for you, that you're not necessarily paid for. It's something that you're sharing with the world that brings you joy. And when she wrote the book, I had her on my podcast and we were talking about it, and she was like, Tara, your podcast is your unicorn space. Yeah. It's like what's serving you, it's what's filling you. I highly recommend it to you and to all of your listeners. So it's Finding Your Unicorn Space by Eve Rodsky. And the whole thing is just about that and when I'm saying our, I mean women's time is just as important as men's.
Mhm.
You know, many times our time is sort of wasted or not as valued as others. And it talks about that in the book. And then it also talks about like, how do you carve out your time
Mhm.
for just you? So I really recommend that as a good read. But if you also want to listen to a podcast, you can listen to my podcast, which is
Absolutely.
Modern Mom Probs,
Yes.
which is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I've been
And I
checking it
have,
out. It's great.
yay, I have great authors like Eve Rodsky. I mean, just I have tons of authors, tons of therapists and doctors. I have everything. I feel like it as long as it falls underneath the category of a modern mom problem, I'm
Mhm.
going to talk about it. So whether it's serious or whether it's silly or whether it's somewhere in between, that's a modern mom problem. And we talk about it on the show.
I love it. And like I said, we're listeners and you were a huge
Mhm.
inspiration to us to take that
Mhm.
step to find that time for us to then create our unicorn space, which now
That's
I feel
right.
like is
I love
definitely
that.
our time.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
It
Oh,
definitely is.
you make me so happy.
So
Yeah.
You ladies filled me with such joy.
well, thank you.
You've given us so many great tips and
Yeah.
inspiration today and like ideas. So it's been great.
Yeah.
We've been
If you'd ever
Awesome.
be interested in
joy.
coming back with us, we would love to
Yeah.
continue to pick your brain because I agree with you. I feel like, you know, when it, like even just looking at self-care, like I can cover really so
Mhm.
many umbrellas and I feel like you could find some sort of niche to talk about in there. And I feel like
Yeah.
we can explore some of your things that you learned along the way in addition.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. 1,000% yes.
Oh,
Thank you
thanks.
so much for having me.
Yes.
No,
Well, thank
dear
you.
goodness, thank you. And I see your little kitty back there. Go snuggle that little kitty and do some parallel play.
We have so many cats. I guess that also counts as a hobby. We
Oh
have three
yeah.
cats,
Yep.
and
Oh,
and usually, so I record in my basement,
Mhm.
and the door's always shut. But my cats were very needy today. They like were like really trying to get my attention. I'm like, it's okay, buddy. Like I'll be right back. And they actually broke the door down to come be with me.
Wow, I
So
didn't know cats can do that. Wow.
my cat Ollie can. Ollie's tall enough, and he actually like turns the handle.
Oh
Like,
my
no,
gosh.
it's like
Wow.
a Jurassic Park moment for you, where like you're sitting in the room and they're like, "Where are the locks?"
it happened to like 3 o'clock in the morning, also. So yeah.
Tara, that's fantastic. Well, yeah, we'll be in touch. We
Yeah.
definitely want to reach out to you more. And like I said,
Yeah.
have you on again. And it's been